Have you ever wanted to go back in time and relive your favorite video game, only to discover it wasn't as good as you remember? Welcome back to Nostalgia vs. Reality, where we dive deep into gaming history to see if those classics are still worth playing today or if they're better off collecting dust. Today, we're discussing one of my all-time favorite games, Final Fantasy VII. I'm ready to face the truth as I take off my rose-colored glasses and give you an honest, unbiased review. Will this legendary RPG still hold up to the high expectations we had back in the day, or will I be crying myself to sleep over how badly it has aged? Let's find out. Released in 1997 by Squaresoft, Final Fantasy VII was the first in the series to feature 3D graphics and full-motion video cutscenes. It introduced the world to its iconic protagonist Cloud Strife and the ultimate edgelord known as Sephiroth. To some, Final Fantasy VII is one of the greatest games of all time. To others, it's the most overhyped. Regardless of what side you're on, the game is largely responsible for introducing JRPGs into the mainstream for the West. I personally didn't know anything about the Final Fantasy series until I played Final Fantasy VII when it was first released. I was so clueless when Final Fantasy VIII came out, I expected it to be a continuation with Cloud. I was extremely disappointed when I saw this guy. Anyways, Final Fantasy VII was a critical and commercial success, selling over 10 million copies and establishing the PlayStation as a major console in the gaming industry. But with all its accolades, we have to ask ourselves, does it still hold up today? Let's start with the gameplay. Final Fantasy VII features turn-based combat, a staple of the series at the time. The game uses the active time battle system, which we discussed in an earlier episode of Nostalgia vs. Reality, where each character has a bar that fills up over time, allowing them to attack once full. Compared to modern RPGs, the ATB system can feel a little slow. Waiting for a character's bar to fill up isn't the most exciting thing in the world to watch. But for me who grew up with turn-based RPGs, this combat system feels more like I'm in control of my party members, allowing me to strategize more. Modern games are often more action-packed and exciting, but they usually give players less control compared to older RPGs. Due to graphical limitations, classic RPGs like Final Fantasy VII required players to control every member of their party, which added depth and strategy. But many modern RPGs have you controlling only one character while the AI handles the rest of the party. While this leads to faster paced, more cinematic battles, it sacrifices some of the traditional RPG elements, turning the experience more into a hack and slash than a true tactical RPG. With that said, I can understand how slow combat might deter newer players to Final Fantasy VII, especially if they're used to newer games. One of the most unique aspects of Final Fantasy VII's combat is the Materia system. Instead of characters learning specific moves or abilities, players equip materia to their characters' weapons and armor, granting them new skills, magic, and even the ability to summon powerful creatures. This system allows for customization based on your party's equipment. Every weapon and armor will have a set number of materia slots. For example, adding fire materia to an empty slot will allow the caster to cast fire. Materia has a leveling system as well. As long as you have the materia equipped, it will gain experience, causing it to level up and making it stronger. If your equipment has two of these materia slots linked, you can combine materia for added effects. An example of this would be linking fire materia with an all materia. The result allows you to cast fire on every enemy. This unique system offers interesting combinations that are definitely worth exploring. Now, one of the major issues with combat was the use of summons. Summons are materia that allow the character to summon monsters to aid you in battle. Most summons had great animations that showcase its devastating attacks on your enemies. The problem with summons was that you were forced to watch the same animation every time you used a summon. After a while, it just turned into a time sink. The best summon in the game, as most of us know, is Knights of the Round. 13 knights attack individually in an epic cutscene. The problem is that this animation lasts for a minute and a half. Summon animations are unskippable, and I think it's by far the worst decision the developers had. And to make matters worse, the most powerful combo in the game is using Knights of the Round with W Summon. W Summon lets you cast the same summon twice in one turn without any extra mana cost. Now we're up to 3 minutes watching this animation. But wait, there's more! Your other character casts Mine, which copies the last action taken in battle for no additional mana. Now we're watching 6 minutes of animation. Fun. Then, once you're done with your insanely long combo, Emerald Weapon smacks your party once and you're dead. Now, you should know, this is a very endgame combo and entirely optional. And even though it was very fun and exciting to watch for the first time, the fact that you can't skip these scenes is just awful. Overall, While the combat is slower by today's standards, the Materia system is still one of the game's strongest points, offering tons of customizations. But the summon cutscenes unfortunately cannot be overlooked, and for that, we give it a 3 out of 5 Buster Swords. Now let's talk about the story and characters. Final Fantasy VII follows Cloud Strife, a former member of an elite military unit called Soldier, who turns mercenary. He is hired by members of a rebel group called Avalanche, a radical and borderline eco-terrorist organization that wants to save the planet. The group consists of Cloud's childhood friend Tifa and her surly friend Barrett, along with some other background characters that you really shouldn't grow attached to. Their goal is to blow up the Mako reactors that are sucking the life out of the planet for energy. For the first few hours, the game leads you to believe it's all about taking down Shinra, the evil corporation killing the planet. When you finally infiltrate Shinra Tower, I remember thinking, wow, this is going to be a short game. But then Cloud and his party get captured, leaving you wondering, what now? But then the game does something interesting, and to this day, it's one of the greatest scenes in gaming history for me. You wake up in your cell, the door is open, no music is playing. You find a dead guard, and Cloud rushes back to wake everyone up. As you leave your cell, you notice that everyone on this floor is dead. You round the corner to see Jenova's container busted open. Blood is on the walls and floor, along with more corpses. Cloud follows the trail of blood that leads up to the president's office. You then discover the president is dead with a huge sword in his back. The game set up the narrative so well that Shinra and its president was the biggest threat to you and the planet, only to have him taken out behind the scenes. It is then revealed that a character named Sephiroth, a former soldier that was thought to be dead, was behind this attack. Yes, the overall story is still about saving the world, but from a much larger scope. And yes, Shinra is still in the background being a pain in the ass throughout the story, but they've been reduced to a minor inconvenience at this point. So the story might be a little hard to follow since the translation for the US release was done by only one person, but the overall message of the story and theme still reaches players, even if it's not grammatically correct. There are 3 main story plots I'd like to discuss. Just a heads up, another massive spoiler warning again. When you're playing the game for the first time, Sephiroth feels like a ghost for the first half of the game. He appears out of nowhere and disappears just the same. One starts questioning, how is this even possible? Well, the game kind of explains it. See, Sephiroth is actually trapped in condensed Mako when he was stabbed and chucked into the lifestream. So what you're seeing and fighting are actually Sephiroth clones created by pieces of Jenova. If you notice, every time you encounter Sephiroth throughout the game, your face was fighting a piece of Jenova. The men in the black robes, rambling about the reunion, are actually being controlled by Jenova and transformed into Sephiroth. The movie Advent Children actually does a better job explaining how this works, as the original game in English translation leaves you scratching your head. The short answer? Sephiroth can use Jenova's cells to create the illusion that the clones are him, or transform parts of Jenova into Sephiroth. The next storyline is Cloud's. As you know, you're introduced to Cloud as an ex-soldier turned mercenary. But as you continue playing and getting more details about Cloud and his past, some things just don't add up. What confused me the most were those conversations Cloud would have with himself, almost like an inner monologue. It wasn't until later that I discovered that this was a conversation between the real Cloud and the persona Cloud we were introduced to in the beginning. So for the main story, you're fighting to stop Sephiroth and protect the world, all while Cloud is having this internal conflict of who he really is. This keeps you on your toes and you start questioning what is real and what isn't. At first you have no reason to question anyone's backstory, and why would you? After all, it is a video game. Getting to play a flashback of Cloud's memories early on, to me only solidified that this is Cloud, a first-class soldier visiting his hometown. It still all made sense. But then things slowly started to unravel, eventually leading to Cloud surrendering the black materia to Sephiroth after you complete the Temple of Ancients. Well, we finally get to learn all about Cloud on Disc 2 when he and Tifa fall into the lifestream. At this point, Cloud's psyche is literally broken, fragmented into scattered and contradictory versions of his memories. You play as Tifa, exploring important memories of the real Cloud and trying to put him back together like Humpty Dumpty. It's finally revealed that Cloud was not completely lying about returning to Nibelheim. Cloud was there for everything, just not as the first-class soldier he proclaimed to be. Since Cloud was rejected from the soldier program, he had no choice but to join Shinra's third-class division. But how did Cloud get so broken? Why was Sephiroth able to control him? And why does he have the eyes of a soldier if he was never in soldier? Well, after the reactor incident in Nibelheim, Hojo, a brilliant but deranged scientist of Shinra, brought Cloud and Zack to the Shinra mansion to experiment on for years. They were both showered with Mako and injected with Jenova cells, the same treatment used to create soldiers, in hopes of creating a Sephiroth clone. Since Zack was already a soldier, he was strong enough to resist the treatment and maintain his sense of identity, But unfortunately for Cloud, he was too weak and originally rejected from the program. He lost himself to Jenova's will, leaving him in a catatonic state. So even though Cloud never qualified to be a soldier, he ended up still going through the same process. Zack eventually frees himself and helps Cloud escape. He cares for him while Cloud suffered from Mako poisoning. During this time, Zack shares his stories about being a soldier and how he plans on going to Midgard to become a mercenary. Unfortunately, Zack is gunned down when Cloud awakens from his catatonic state. Zack's stories imprint on Cloud's blank mind, causing Cloud to subconsciously adopt Zack's memories as his own. This is how we get the version of Cloud we meet at the start of the game, with a blended identity based on both their experiences. Okay, now it's time to talk about something we all knew was coming: the death of Aerith. For me, this was the first time I experienced a main character dying in a video game. Even though it was polygons, the infamous scene of Sephiroth descending from above and piercing Aerith while she was praying was incredibly shocking. Let's not forget the lead up of Cloud almost killing her himself. The whole sequence of events was shocking and infuriating, and it left a lot of people crying, myself included. So even though the story in Final Fantasy VII is epic, suspenseful, and thrilling, it really suffers from translation issues and convoluted storytelling. Some of these story details are more fleshed out in other games and movies to help better explain and tie together pieces that might not make much sense during the first playthrough. And for that, we give the original story and characters 4 out of 5 Buster Swords. On to graphics and visuals. Brace yourself. It isn't pretty. For 1997, Final Fantasy's visuals were a step towards 3D gaming. Unfortunately, it wasn't a step that aged well. The game used 3D character models on pre-rendered 2D backgrounds as a way of focusing on a more realistic presentation. For combat, this actually looked pretty decent for the time, and in my opinion, aged relatively okay. But the exploration part of the game? It's a visual nightmare. The polygon characters were, let's face it, awful. I mean, look at this. They also felt way out of place navigating on 2D backgrounds, almost like you were playing a board game. Not to mention some scaling issues with the characters. The only redeeming thing I could think of for graphics and visuals were the cutscenes. Final Fantasy VII was the first Final Fantasy game to use full motion video cutscenes, and even though they may look a bit dated today, this was absolutely fantastic for 1997. Final Fantasy VII was the first in the series to use CDs, and with all the full motion video cutscenes, animations, and gameplay time, a cartridge simply wouldn't have cut it. Originally, Final Fantasy VII was intended for Nintendo's upcoming console, which was also set to use CDs. However, halfway through production, Nintendo decided to scrap the project in favor of a cartridge-based system, later known as the N64. Since Squaresoft was already developing this innovative game using CDs, they had no choice but to move to Sony's new PlayStation. While CDs are often associated with longer load times, the amount of data that they can store is undeniable. Final Fantasy VII was a 3-disc game, making it one of the largest games of its time. Can you imagine how many cartridges it would have taken to play this game on the N64? Well, I did the math, and it would have required 21 cartridges! The polygon graphics have not aged as gracefully as the sprites of its predecessor. For new fans of the series, these outdated visuals might deter them from ever giving this game a chance. And for that reason, we give graphics and visuals a 2 out of 5 Buster Swords. No discussion for Final Fantasy VII would be complete without mentioning its unforgettable music. Composed by the legendary Nobu Uematsu, the soundtrack ranges from the saddened melodies of Aerith's theme to the adrenaline-pumping intensity of One Wing Angel. The music plays a crucial role in setting the tone for each scene, making it memorable even for those who haven't played the game. Today, orchestras continue to perform these iconic tracks, showcasing their enduring appeal. While all Final Fantasy games feature exceptional soundtracks, Final Fantasy VII stands out as the most iconic and recognizable, earning a perfect 5 out of 5 Buster Swords. So, nostalgia versus reality, what's the verdict? Final Fantasy VII was one of the hottest games in 1997, and while some of its elements haven't aged perfectly, the core experience remains just as compelling. The story, characters, and music still hold up as one of the best in the RPG genre. The gameplay and graphics, however, definitely feel dated, and unfortunately cast a shadow on the game's overall legacy. With our rose-colored glasses removed, it pains me to say that Final Fantasy VII barely survives with 3.5 out of 5 Buster Swords. It's like Sephiroth stabbed Aerith again. In the end, Final Fantasy VII took a few hits. Time was not kind to this game, unfortunately. But as a longtime fan, I still recommend this game for its compelling story. So, do you agree with our rating for Final Fantasy VII? What memorable game would you like us to discuss next? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for the next episode of Nostalgia vs. Reality. Maybe your favorite game will be next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.